Yeah, so I forgot to say that those percussion things that are throughout the piece are rhythms that proportional to the entire form, so all the time. So I make them in like 8 different tempos. So you can do it by the quarter note, 8 note, the triplet, the 16 note, the quintuplet, and so that one you always have a grid of 8 or as many layers as you want. That you can have either counterpoints of different tempi of this proportional. I don't know, is anyone going to remember that the entire form? No, but nevertheless, it helps build a network of things to work with. So if you guys have any questions, more than happy to.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Something that actually I find really absorbing about this piece is that there's some sort of implied pulse.
Implied pulse.
Yeah, I mean, like obviously there are these spots that it's like dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
You definitely hear it.
Yeah.
But even like when you have like this pedal like lines like it's just staying there somehow. I mean, that was my perception. I was still hearing that beating. And I was very like I just was about to ask you. How did you achieve that? I mean, it might be just my perception, but I think that it's actually on the score.
Yeah, I think the middle section is what carries the pulse for the most part. Just thinking about how the piece is, how the dance movement, let's say, it's always in the beginning of each subsection, but also the middle of the entire piece is some kind of a more driving thing. So that's probably one way. And the tempos are also interlocked in the same proportions as the rhythm. So very often, like the 8th note will become the triplet will become the quintuplet, or I don't know, or the 16th note will become. So there's always a little like an organic switch of tempos that by the time you realize you're already in a new. I don't know if that would help something like that, but. And the other thing is because the form is so highly subdivided that in a way it becomes rhythmicized, right? Because the small sections are so. I mean, there are subdivisions. There are 3/16 notes, for example, and that refers to a bigger part of it. But so we always have like this kind of short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long. That refers to the entire piece, but also in a way rhythmicizes and articulates the phrases, I think, and that would I think contribute to that kind of feeling of movement.
Yeah.
Anything else? And the sound I used. I forgot to tell. In the string quartet, the source sounds were my voice and guitar harmonics. And in the string quartet, whenever I use my voice as a chord, let's say you analyze the computer, bring the chord, come up with a model, and whenever I have the vocal models, it's more legato. Whenever I have the guitar models, it's more pizzicato and short. And similar things happen in the orchestra piece, but the models are earth gong, like low piano. There's in the folk section, I use a time stretch kalimba progression, like a little African kalimba. You stretch, you get all the strange overtones because the kalimba is not really tuned like the piano. So I use those source materials as well, which I forgot to talk about as harmony.
What happens if you look at just a wave file of the recording, like say this most recent orchestra piece, and you see the kind of amplitude areas?
That's very interesting.
Because there's all sorts of dynamic stuff going on in this piece.
So you probably see stuff like this, right?
Yeah. So if you've done that, or even if you haven't, just imagine it.
I haven't, but I will.
How do you think? Okay, so then guess now. Go on camera and guess how you think the amplitude regions that you might perceive there will intersect with this kind of nested formal regions.
Nested what?
These nested formal regions.
Formal regions, yeah. Right. If I have to try to imagine that. I don't think they would intercept because I think the amplitude would be more related to actually the the dramatic aspect of the piece, which I think is a lot more generated than the accumulation of objects that are that happen by me going through this form and wondering. But once there are things that are palpable, I think this is the music versus the formal, as you put, the formal plan. Or so I think these amplitudes have more to do with these amplitude peaks have more to do with the drama of what there's a good word for it. Like these leftovers of form, which is actually now the music. What's the word? Residues. Of this, yeah, I think the amplitude is a lot more related to the residues of what is being accumulated. But I may be wrong. It would be a cool thing to look and measure. John.
You described all these things that you put into the piece. And if I were putting all those things into a piece, I'd lose it. I'd be too distracted and scattered. So how do you, it sounds like a very focused piece.
Graph paper. All day long. Yeah. So I thought I brought it for both pieces. There's coffee stains and cigarette holes in the, I spent a lot of time with this. But yeah, I mapped out in, first I spent I think a month and a half just mapping out a form, like a global form that would seem interesting from far away. So all of the proportions are mapped, the accidents are there, the tempi I put from the beginning so that I can create relationships. And then once I have this form, let's say this is 14 minutes laid down, then I go and I put another graph paper only for the first section, and then I subdivide equally, right, in graph paper, so that everything is very much exact in terms of plan. Once I get into the music, I start to break it a little bit, quite a bit. And sometimes, especially when these accidents, these tangents, I thought initially that I would just go through them, through their given point, but I thought if they're accidents, they better be accidents. So I usually they get more independent as the piece goes. These tangents they kind of take over a little bit like a disease. A good one. Yeah.
I was going to ask about the repeats and how that develops over the piece. You've got almost in the beginning, percussion instrument I can't read playing 30-second notes, so you have this sort of repeated thing going right away. Then when you hear material on the repeat side, it takes about halfway through the second repeat to realize that it's actually a repeat.
Yeah, the point is that I don't think you can tell. I mean, if you look at the score, you will see a lot of repeats, but I don't think at first hearing you could, especially when there are big sections with lots of chords that somehow I worked out so that they could loop and it would make sense to loop them. And in a way, I almost felt like I should have more repetition, repeat more times in each one, perhaps. But I mean, when I mean repeat, the repeated 30-second notes, wouldn't even count that as a repeat. It's just the articulation of, I'm actually articulating the form, so it was like, let's say, you would take 13 of those 30-second notes, and then the next section would be 3, and then, so I use it as accents, and this would be almost as a held note, but it's activated, right? So the accents is what, it was break things apart and resemble the global form. So in the percussion would be the accents. So you get the clave, rear. And even if you look at the score, I use thicker lines for the division of the local forms and double lines whenever we cross to the next section. Oh, and in my original score, I had it marked what is what the entire time in the bottom. So we are in fire section against techno, and the entire chord was so. But after I was done, I threw it all away. I went back to finale, and then I pushed, and then I really like messed a little bit things up. But it didn't change. I mean, not changing much, but maybe like leaking one thing into the other. The addition of fermatas would be. I mean, there's lots of fermatas. Some of them, most of them are the tangents, like the freezing time tangent or the time machine and so forth. I don't know if I responded.
about the messing up, I wanted to ask the question
What is the
in this
point?
way, which is how bloody can your knife be, right? Because you have this section cutting knife, and I mean these metric some of the metric modulations you really do hear them.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, and so this is actually, I mean, I'm not sure how to interpret that. If that's a very smooth thing, or if that's actually a very disjoint. I'm not sure, but do you go back through after you have the materials laid out, and then use finger or use chocolate or use gentle floss to?
Yeah, I mean, it isn't that destructive because I've been kind of destructing it for the entire process of the composition. The last one is basically just like look at it like a conductor. I just took all the leftovers of descriptions of the form and I spent, I don't know, 2 weeks looking at it, and just from a purely musical standpoint, as if I didn't know any of it. So you can fix, I don't know, this here is just a little bit of the tempo. Maybe they were originally exact metric modulations, but maybe in the metronome is a little bit too slow. So like tweaking, but very, very minuscule. So it would be dental floss, not chocolate or blood.
I have a question about what you're calling accidents. I'm just wondering why you consider them accidents if it's part of your compositional idea from the beginning, why it's planned.
Because before I added the accents, I added a perfect form that, like a crystal palace, that is all perfect and proportional and this and that. And then I wanted to force myself, even from the pre-composition stage, to break this thing. Because I thought that those 2 accents were interesting enough accidents. Just, I mean, wherever we are on the piece, a bunch of chords from, we got to remember the chakra. I thought that was a cool idea because these are big chords, first of all, 20 plus notes, timbres, really. So they may either get lost or be difficult to be, to stick in the ear. So I forced myself to insert a déjà vu of them in different points, so that the ear is constantly, even though they will never sound the same because of note values and stuff, nevertheless they're there. And in terms of the tension, it's more like a structural accident instead of a harmonic one. So just like stretching something, stopping something, cutting something, taking a immediate contrast. I guess it's just like a strategy, really, more than it's not an accident in the sense that it's like you said, it's a great question. And it is that much of an accident because they are, in a way, just another formal section, right? But they are accident because the form was pristine before I even thought of them, and then I started insert. Yeah. And in terms of form, I mean, the accidents come on the golden section, and then in the counter, it coming from here and then coming from there. So that these are accidents. So they're very carefully constructed accidents.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. We're going to have a 5-minute break, all right, and then we're going. Thanks a lot.
Gracias.